Well, Alchemist is a weird one to review because it seems that the vast majority of games I'm revisiting at the moment do not live up to my name at all. Rose Tinted Spectrum should really be changed to Disappointed Man Moments going forward, but I can't be bothered paying for another logo, so sod it, let's carry on.
So if I were like a wizard, then alchemist, whatever.
Alchemist was a game I had very fond memories of, while also not really remembering anything about it. In my head, there was a big, fantastical, arcadey adventure awaiting me, when in actual fact, all that's actually here is not really anything, honestly. It's just sort of there. At least you can turn into a giant bird, though. Who doesn't want to do that? That giant bird, incidentally, that's the thing I remember most of all. That concept of freedom of exploration, not just horizontally but vertically, in a way not dissimilar from the bird in Slightly Magic, where I'd also remembered that segment of the game as a huge freeform wing flapping zone, but it was actually just 3 screens. Here's the thing though, in my head, even right up to the moment before I started to play Alchemist again, I'd somehow merged in my own imagination as fact. Playing this game as a kid, I couldn't get very far because it's a ZX Spectrum game and that's just what you have to expect when you're 8 years old. My brain then imagined things about it that weren't there. The Alchemist of my mind contained multiple different animals you could play as. It had various spells you could use against the enemies. Even the black background we see on the screen here, that wasn't there in my head. That was a fully realised castle background. How strange it was to discover that none of that actually existed. This is the first time I've loaded the game up in 30 years, and it looks old and frail, withered by existing in real life rather than in my own head. And the box literally has the word Imagine on it in massive letters. It's like an actual instruction. Before I get into the game itself, of which there is very little, truth be told, I'd like to point out that the reviews for this game were pretty damn high, and it's a trend I often see at this early stage of ZX Spectrum development. This was a 48k game, and if you made a game look this good back in 1983 and it didn't break when you pressed a button, you'd be pretty much dead on the money for getting at least an 8 out of 10 from the magazines at the time. Quickly followed up a year or two later with a follow-up review that lowers the score by 2 to 3 marks. The same can be said of this. Crash Magazine, in issue 2, gave the game 85%, with the vast majority of the review dedicated to the graphics, animation, and how big the game felt.
The presentation is very good, with a high-quality title screen and adequate instruction, although a bit more advice wouldn't go amiss. The graphics are very good, and so is the sound, with a rather spooky organ tune which sets the scene well. In playing, the game is extremely good, fun and very addictive. Definitely another winner for Imagine.
Fast forward to issue 8, and while they don't rescore the game, they also don't have an awful lot of good things to say about it.
Alchemist does have some imaginative graphics, although I can't agree with the review exceptional graphics. They are quite old looking and don't move very easily about the screen. The keyboard layout is poor. Overall, this game comes nowhere near Attic Attack, as mentioned in the original review. The castle, which seemed massive on first playing, has dwindled down to just a dozen separate rooms. I think it was overrated.
1 year that took. 1 year's difference to go from "this is amazing" to "it's a bit shit, isn't it?" So I don't feel too bad for feeling roughly the same now, 30 years on from that initial experience, because Alchemist, sadly, just isn't very good. It starts, funnily enough, with that bird transformation. As a wizard, you can't really do anything of use. You can walk up some stairs, it's always handy, but as soon as you reach a drop, you'll just freeze in fear. You do have the ability to throw some silly string out of your hands, but it doesn't seem to do a great deal of anything, so yeah, don't bother being a wizard. Just be a majestic eagle the entire time. And I really do mean that. One of the coolest things about the game was the ability to transform, but there's practically no reason to not be the eagle. You can move around better, you can dodge things easier, you can still pick up items you need, and the wizard's attack, so pointless. You just won't bother with it anyway, so yeah, just be an eagle. Life is better when you're an eagle. Perhaps Imagine has accidentally made the most patriotic game in existence, if you're an American. The next issue is just what on earth it is you're actually supposed to do. There's no indications in-game as to what your task is, so it's up to the instruction manual to fill in those gaps.
You, the most skilled alchemist on Earth, have been summoned to do battle with the evil warlock who is terrorizing the land. you must enter his castle and find the 4 sections of the magic scroll, which will enable you to defeat the warlock by turning his own spell of destruction against him.
Okay, cool. So I have to find 4 sections of a magic scroll. Excellent. Only that's not really it, because there aren't just bits of magic scroll dotted around in these maze of rooms. What you actually have to do is find specific items that you then take to a treasure chest in a sanctuary, which will then give you the bits of scroll you need. The only way you'd know this is by sheer chance. There's absolutely zero indication that any of what I've just said is a thing that happens. The items themselves are also not exactly obvious, and there are plenty of red herrings littered around to slow you down. The 4 items you need are a magic lamp of the Aladdin style, a bar of lead which you use a transform spell on in order to create gold, literally the only alchemic thing you do in this entire game called Alchemist. There's also a ring, and a vase. Why these 4 items? I don't know. Genuinely, I don't know what the game is trying to say with any of the actions you take. There are plenty of things that would make sense. Alchemists deal with earth-based nonsense, so why it couldn't have been an item based on air, earth, fire and water? I don't know. That would have made sense, right? They could have kept it cryptic that way. You'd still need to figure out which items are useful, but it wouldn't require you to just go, a vase. Vases are good. Should I try the the vase worked. That's good. This nonsense guesswork could be somewhat forgiven if there was anything else interesting going on, but there really isn't. The castle layouts are just arbitrary nonsenses. The enemies are either pointless because you can just fly over them, or annoying because there's no real way to get past them without taking damage or finding a spell that damages them. But those are single use, so your best bet is to just pick up an axe or a sword, take the damage to the face, and then use a restore spell to bring your stamina back up. The final segment of the game then sees you transform back into a wizard for the first and final time to use a scroll that you got by doing things you didn't understand, pressing a button, and getting some text on the screen. What a fittingly depressing ending. You know, I've been looking at this box and this artwork in particular. This was my memory of the game. Not the game itself, but this artwork. This is what the game was to me, when in actual fact the game itself is closer to this Curry's budget box. Alchemist does the opposite of alchemy. It takes something and turns it into nothing. It's an absence of enjoyment, or intrigue, or fun. It seems that wasn't just the case for me, a child with a brain that reformed entire experiences on the fly. It was also the case for reviewers at the time. The early 80s moved fast when it came to ZX Spectrum development, and things that wowed audiences and critics alike were falling out of favour in double quick time. The gap in quality between early Spectrum games, with an admittedly lower memory to play with, and late-stage Spectrum games, it's a generational gap through and through. Sadly though, now at least, there is nothing to be gained from playing Alchemist, even with nostalgia in tow. The only gain I got was in remembering the things about it that only existed in my own head in the first place. A waging war of two wizards where one of them can probably turn into a cheetah, or a dinosaur, or a cannon, and the castle has got all these rooms in it like a casino and a swimming pool, and also the castle is sometimes a car. In much the same way Alchemist turned something into nothing, for the past 30 years I'd been turning that nothing back into something.
Flying high as a majestic eagle, running quite fast as a parsley beagle, swimming through seas as a giant shark, solving crime as a clever-eyed vark.
Alchemist,
Transforming wizard man,
alchemist,
to fight a wizard's plan.
alchemist,
He's transforming wizard man,
alchemist.
to fight a wizard's plan. He fights in the castle, he fights in the trees. He can fight on the moon with comparative ease, shooting out lasers from all war on terror. As a giant bear, he fights the war on terror. As a giant bearer. Here he comes as a dinosaur, flying into the sun on his pet centaur, looking the earth with harmonic rays. The alchemist brings forth the end of days. Here he comes as a dinosaur, flying into the sun on his pet centaur. He's stronger than God, and he can turn into a cod. He's stronger than God, and he can turn into a cod. He's the alchemist, the fucking alchemist. Don't make him alchemist, 'cause he's the alchemist.
I guess in some ways, the real alchemist was me.